Hi everyone, I'm Shruti, the Business Development Manager for Telecoms World Asia, and welcome to today's panel on Asia's big MVNO opportunity. We have a great lineup of speakers today from China Mobile International, Red One, Titan Global Group, and Vodafone. This panel will be moderated by Alan Rasmussen, who's the CEO at One Development WeConnect Thailand. For any questions to our panelists, please post them into the live discussion area on the right side of your screen. So without any further ado, I would now like to pass this over to Alan, who will begin this panel discussion. Thanks, Alan. Over to you.
Thank you very much. With its large population and diverse demographic, the Asia-Pacific region is considered a key growth region when it comes to MVNO, and we have already witnessed this success both from early MVNO pioneers and also from new entries. It is, however, also a region with diverse challenges, regulation, demands, and opportunities. The digital economy, mobile penetration, as well as COVID-19 outbreak has accelerated the demand for flexible work and lifestyle, and further pushed the adoption of affordable, innovative, and tailored communication services. With that in mind, I welcome you to this panel session, Asia's big MVNO opportunity, where I am pleased to be joined by some of the MVNO pioneers I mentioned earlier to discuss these topics. Maybe we should start with a roundup introduction on who we are, what we have done, and what we are doing. And perhaps, Danny, you would like to kick off.
Yeah, thank you, Alan. My name is Danny Sridharan, and I've been in the telecommunication industry for more than 30 over years, with mainly in the MVNO market for more than 15 years. Today, I'm a senior principal consultant with Titan Global Consulting, a company that does consulting for MVNOs and telecommunication companies that would want to extend their footprint into the Asia-Pacific market. So if there's anybody in the audience who want to expand their footprints into the Asia-Pacific market, please feel free to connect with me via the Telecom World Asia web portal or directly via my LinkedIn. Thank you.
Thank you, Danny. Herman, would you like to go next?
Yeah, hi, everybody. This is Herman from China Mobile International. So I have been working in the telecom industry for more than 20 years, and in the MVNO industry is about 15 years or so. So I started first MVNO in Hong Kong, and then I have been in both parts of the industry. So I have been working as the MVNO, and then I'm working in the MNO who run the wholesale business. So right now, China Mobile International has the initiative that we started this initiative a few years ago, 3 years ago, that we would like to start with a new brand called CM Link as our MVNO vehicles, so that we can better serve the overseas Chinese.
Thank you very much. And Farid?
Greetings, everybody. Hello, Alan.
Greetings.
My name is Farid Yunus. I started out in 2006 with Celcom Axiata, holding various positions, including Chief Strategy Officer and Chief MVNO Officer, which gave me the insight into how we can make an MVNO work. And so we took over Redtone Mobile in 2012, changed the name to Red One in 2014. Now we have 1.2 million subscribers in Malaysia. We also launched in Singapore last year. We're launching in Thailand and the Philippines next year. And so while we may not be the first pan-regional MVNO, I think arguably we are the largest in the region, Southeast Asia.
Thank you very much for it. And Ash?
Yes, good afternoon, good evening, everyone. My name's Ash Saini. I'm currently with Vodafone Australia. My history has been with the Lebara business. I've been with Lebara Australia since 2010, and just transitioned from a role in recently in July. And during that time, basically taking Lebara as a European MVNO into the Australian market. I was part of the senior team, and then taking that later into a sale with Vodafone Australia. In 2016, Vodafone Australia took over the business. So there's a very unique perspective in that, particularly the last 10 years in relation to an MVNO being in both a arm's length in terms of a traditional wholesale arrangement, and post acquisition in regards to being a fully owned brand within an MNO environment. And now I'm working in a role within Vodafone still in the actual Vodafone MNO business.
Thank you very much. And I think maybe for being off this on opportunities, perhaps we should also look into for a long period, we have talked about MVNOs coming in at a lower pricing than the MVNOs in the market. Maybe differentiation is actually key in seeking opportunities in all markets, but maybe also here where we have a lot of segments due to the cultural diversity. So I would like to start with you on this one, because you also had your foot in both camps, and you have done full circle, so to say, from the MVNO or the Vodafone side as well. How important do you see the differentiation versus pricing, low pricing strategy coming into this market, this region?
Look, I think pricing is just one part of the equation. I think as an MVNO operator, I think it's really about trying to identify the niche and trying to work through what the market opportunity is, and really getting behind that niche and that opportunity 200%. I think pricing is a dangerous lever. We all know what's experienced in many of the markets, and I've had the fortune of meeting a couple of the panelists here in person through various conferences pre-COVID in Asia. And I think when you talk around similar markets, we all have the same issues. So my personal experience has been one around trying to create the best customer experience possible, doing better than the MNOs, also being able to provide tools and pricing product and attract new customers which are compelling. And essentially you have to outdo the MNO that you work with to try to fulfill that journey. And now moving into the MNO space, now it's very clear around the opportunity they have, and it's very evident, in fact, what opportunities that MVNOs have taken, and how MNOs now look towards MVNOs to try to improve onboarding processes, really try to target the niches cleverly, whether they're by ethnic types or certain segments in the market. And it has been fascinating watching that journey, particularly as in Australia being particularly high cost country. There is a huge dividend for pushing technology and driving apps and ways in which, particularly in prepaid, making that journey much more simple, streamlined, and very clear. But I say, as I said at the outset, I don't think an MVNO can be successful if it doesn't have a basis or a rationale and a core conviction of why it exists. If it can't explain to itself why it exists, it will struggle to explain to the market and to the distribution channels why its purpose.
Thank you very much. Farid, you have also done a different approach in your rollout from the beginning. As I understand it, you have also, is there an agreement on a maximum or a lower tariff that you can take in the Malaysian market when you rolled out? So you're actually going after perhaps being pushed to the segment that are pricing aware, but still not competing directly with your host operator.
In Red One's case, we are a postpaid MVNO, so we're unique in all our markets in being the only postpaid MVNO. And so we went after the budget consumer, a lot of prepaid conversion to postpaid. So our lowest plan was $2 a month. And you don't get much for $2 a month, and postpaid, you have the risk of bad debt as well. But we managed that. And but our ARPU is actually $10 a month. We use the $2 as the bait, and then we upsell them to a higher value plan. But speaking from the telco perspective, we are lucky in that Celcom was probably the first MNO to agree to a revenue share basis rather than a wholesale retail type arrangement. Because due to competition, and I'm sure many other markets have seen this, where the retail rate falls faster than the wholesale rate. So every quarter, you're going back cap in hand to your MNO, begging for a lower wholesale rate in order to remain profitable. So the idea that MVNOs go after cheap pricing versus MNOs, I think is false, is because most of the time we can't afford to sell cheaper than the MNOs.
Herman, you also done what we could call a niche, as mentioned it before, about ethnic or maybe a segment of perhaps mainly Chinese tourists or even Chinese immigrants living overseas.
Yes, from China Mobile, of course, we are targeting the Chinese ethnic segment. In terms of pricing, that the question you just asked is about the pricing. I think right now the customer are looking for a better experience on top of pricing. In the past, remember in Thailand, for example, when Thailand just launched 4G, for example, the retail price is about 400, 500 Thai baht for a plan, for a monthly plan. But right now it dropped to the 100, 200 level, so everybody can actually afford it. In that sense, customers actually change their behavior. And then right now, when they are selecting their service provider, we believe that they are selecting the experience rather than just looking at the pricing. Of course, pricing is attractive, but at the same time, customers are looking at which brand are they familiar with, and then what kind of services will they get. So they're expecting better services rather than just looking at the pricing. So that's why, from our perspective, when we are entering the market, we try to differentiate ourselves with our own services, how to better serve those target segments. I think that's the strategy that MVNO should take when entering the market.
Is any of you, how much, it doesn't have to be in figures, but is everything based on purely on telecom revenue, or how much are you upselling, cross-selling on other? Do you have insurance, for example, which would fit perfectly for an ethnic market, or PTV or something else that you have? Maybe Herman, you can tell if you have additional services that you're upselling. And again, don't need to share the exact
For example, like the payment method, very simple as a payment method. In our services, most of the Chinese, they use Alipay or WeChat Pay. So in our services, we support this kind of payment mechanism. But local operators or MNO, they may not have this capacity or may not have that kind of focus to build up this payment method to give more convenience to the customers. And then, for example, like in China, a lot of customers are actually using the Taobao or some e-commerce website. They need to receive the SMS verifications, the one-time password. So we help them to facilitate the SMS forwarding functions. So in case they use our overseas services, like we currently have our footprint in 5 different markets, in UK, Canada, Thailand, Singapore, and also Japan. So in case they want to receive this kind of one-time password, they can actually build up the link between their China mobile number with this Singapore or Canadian China mobile number, so that those SMS will be forwarded to the overseas numbers. Then they don't need to carry 2 SIM cards, 2 phones. So it gives them a lot of convenience. And if you can convey this kind of convenience to the customers, then they don't bother I mean, they may not mind to pay $1 to $2 extra in order to get these kind of services. And one more important thing that we provide to the customer is that we enable roam like home services. They use the overseas SIM card, but when they travel back to China or Hong Kong, then we allow them to have this roam like home services, so they don't need to pay for roaming fee, even they use a UK SIM in China and Hong Kong. So this is the unique proposition that we are offering to our target customers.
And Farid, as I would say, the same question to you on upselling or cross-selling from either existing services or partner services, not
yes,
only relying
certainly. There's a reason our full name is Red One Network, because we've built up a network of more than 2,000 dealers that carry our signage, and we have 100 premium outlets. And we realized last year that we have this opportunity to cross-sell non-telco products. So at the moment, we resell car insurance, health insurance, personal accident insurance, credit cards. This month, we launched our first drop ship centers inside our store. So Post Malaysia is outsourcing 100% of their services to Red One dealers. They become the local town's post office, in effect. And I can give you numbers. Right now, it's not big. Only about 2% of our top line is being generated by these non-telco services. But we want to take that to 20% within 3 years. Otherwise, you're just reliant on your MNO, right?
Yes. And Ash, Do you have similar?
Yeah, look, we have had many, and there's been probably more unsuccessful ones than successful ones. But I think much like I think Herman's mentioned for China Telecom, it's always been trying to create value on the core proposition, and I think extending from that. So I think insurance is a good one. It's put in place. I think our market is particularly unique because of the regulatory issues involved, and that makes it a huge barrier to overcome in that way, and can actually destroy the value from that point of view. But we've got Australia being a point of destination where there's a very high migrant population. For example, Sydney, 75% of people are born overseas. We have high migrant population, and obviously people want to take care of their family at home. So we have international credit transfer. You can transfer value from your SIM to your loved ones in their home country, for example, which is very helpful for particularly elderly grandparents, etc. As an example. And we've also worked with partnerships, particularly on the entertainment front. So I think we've entered into Lebara's entered in with Yup TV by way of example, and captured the IPL tournament as a way to bring that to our customers, and then bring a unique proposition linked to the mobile side of it as well, which tries to then creates more of a differentiation on that side, and then the excitement of wanting to watch that tournament. Then creates interest in the mobile service, and suddenly you're not talking about price and MNOs, etc. So we have had a lot of successful ventures in that place. I think in the past where Lebara as a group tried to work in the entertainment area, it wasn't so successful. Went very hard and big behind a full entertainment solution as a brand new vertical, and I tried to run it as a second business, and its cash flow profile and the business model was completely incompatible with the mobile model, and obviously even just handling of inventory and selling through to dealers, and the fact that the monetization was in the subscription portion with a very significant upfront hardware investment, made that very, very challenging. I think it seemed easier in reality, trying to pursue a dream, but I think in practice proved to be very, very difficult from that point of view. So I think from that point on, we learned to be very selective around that front, and particularly I think some of the ideas that Farid has put in place, I think very keen to look at some of those options in our market.
Danny, you often, when you travel around the world to help MVNOs or brands or enterprises set up the middleman between doing the package selling to the host operator. How two questions for you on one on the differentiation, how much and from your point of view have you seen that, what's important for the MNOs in that aspect, and secondly for those that are enterprises already, or a brand in the market, how do they try to differentiate, and perhaps how much do you see them upselling what they have already, especially retailers, MVNOs, for example?
Thanks, Alan. I think the most important thing that we have to look back is the basis of becoming an MVNO. I think a lot of people want to get into the MVNO market segment, and mainly getting into the right momentum as a light MVNO. You will have to have somebody who's in between, who enables these light MVNOs to move into the space of offering telecommunication services. In this case, I think it's very vital for an MVNE and an MVNA who comes in between the MVNO and the operator himself, because that will actually enable a lot of new entrants who has a holding and has a niche market that they support and they have within themselves, but they are afraid and unable to get into the market, because as a light and MVNO, getting into the marketplace, negotiating with the telco to either whatever the commercial model, whether it's retail minus wholesale or revenue share, that's already becomes the first obstacle and the first challenge. And thereafter, when you overcome that, and then the MNO normally makes it even tougher with minimum guarantees and things like that. But today, what I'm seeing is that things have moved from that kind of a situation, where aggressive MVNEs and MVNAs, especially aggregators, who comes in between and plays the role to enable light MVNOs to come on board. Today, I'm seeing, in fact, I'm consulting and talking to a lot of new players that's going to come into the market space, where, for examples like a bank turning into a fintech digital MVNO, as what it used to be, hypermarkets coming into play, insurance companies, utility companies, all trying to get into the space of as an MVNO, because things are getting digitalized. So why not get into the space where I have a holding of a target audience, which is sizable enough, or some of them have very large market segments that they control and they hold, to come into this space? Because today, most companies have their own IT department. So some of them are converting, because IT and telecommunication are actually converging to become one entity. So the IT department is also transforming to become a telecommunication department. So if I have a organization, if I have an insurance company or have a bank, which I have many subscribers, maybe have 50,000, 100,000 subscribers, I would like to come into this market space. But my challenge would be the know-how of the business. How do I invest in a platform, and how do I manage end-to-end the platform, the services? So in these circumstances, when an MVNE and an MVNA comes and take away that role from them and say, don't worry, I will do end-to-end manage systems for you. I will put a platform in between you and the operator. All you got to do is just focus on your target audience, go out there and promote and sell, and put some dollars into your pocket, probably on a revenue sharing understanding between the MVNA operator and themselves. So this is where I see the market is moving. So I foresee many players coming as light and thin MVNOs, where that's rightfully where everybody should come in. I think that's where it's evolving from full MVNO models, which used to be the foundation of large MVNOs, to back to the lighter MVNOs coming into play with the assistance of the MVNE and MVNA.
That actually is quite interesting, I would say, because Herman, you have gone into these 5 markets, and they must be, a different, both regulatory wise, there must be some that maybe prohibits a full MVNO, and you are probably more interested maybe in a thin model. But can you share how your approach has been? Did you just, set up your own platform and then decided to copy and paste and scale into other markets, or is it a different approach each place? Do you have an MVNE between you, or are you directly on the host operator?
Yes. First of all, I agree with what Danny just said, that right now with more MVNE and MVNA, then the entry barrier is actually lowered. So it's easier for a company to run this MVNO business. For us, of course, we have to piggyback on the MVNE or MVNA as well. So in each individual market, we have our own MVNE. And then, of course, in order to better serve the customers, then of course we have our own CRM and business management system. So integrating with the MVNE. So I think that's a typical architecture that every MVNO have. So we remain control of the customer relationship. So I think that's the typical setup that we've used. I think one thing we are somehow differentiate from the others is that how to build up the relationship with the other MNOs. Because China Mobile, we have a long-term relationship with all the MNOs around the world. So we may have some, you may say, an advantage when we're setting up the MVNO in other countries. So we have a lot of good friends, a lot of good partners that are willing to work with us. So in that sense, it may lower our entry barrier to other markets as well. That's why we can actually launch in 5 different markets within these 3 years. So I think that's the tips to the newcomers if they want to consider to enter the market.
Farid, I think the same will go to you. I know you invested or partnered to set up on a platform recently. How will that help you scale into the Philippines, Thailand, and Vietnam?
Well, can I actually be a dissenter? can be a dissenting voice. The minute you add in an MVNE, MVNA, and sorry guys, it means you're sharing your margin with a middleman, a third party. Wherever possible, we try to integrate directly into the MNO. Of course, MNOs hate this because they don't want to go through the technical problem of GX/GY integration a dozen times. They prefer to have a single point of integration and then MVNOs ride on the MVNE. But I personally have not had many good experiences with MVNEs. In Singapore, we were forced to use the MVNE by StarHub. And I tell you, if any other MNO comes along in Singapore and says, hey, Farid, I'll let you plug in directly, we will move tomorrow. Sorry, StarHub. That's just the reality. We're completely dissatisfied with the service offered and the price. We have to pay two people. You pay the operator and you pay the MVNE provider. So I'd rather go direct, to be honest.
Yes. And Herman, you wanted to add something before?
Herman, you want to invest in Red One? We're doing an IPO next year.
Yeah, we will talk about it offline. Well, yeah, I think we got different approach. Yeah, using an MVNE or direct connect with the operators are both workable options. It depends on the commercial, honestly. It depends on how you manage the MVNE or MVNA. So I think both options work depending on the market, depending on your business model.
As from your side on Lebara and Vodafone as well, how was the approach from Lebara in and once that Vodafone acquired, what changed? If something changed, was there a platform? Did they get their own HLR? Did they already have their own HLR set up? Was it a full MVNO approach?
Yeah, I think look, the Lebara one is in Australia and some of the other markets. I just sort of more observation from a distance, but in Australia, it's more probably a light MVNO model, probably not a full thin one, but a lighter one. So in the sense of working with the MNO assigned MVNE in that way, and I respect the views of the others, and I think there's a lot of validity in that way. I think particularly I can resonate what Farid is saying in terms of a standalone. You are pushed with the margin, and that's the reality. But that's often the quick way to get into market and to get moving. And I think it's really then trying to make sure that the commercial structures line up well with that, notwithstanding that, as I think the comment was made very well before, and they have experienced this more than one time, where the retail market changes very fast and there is a lag on the wholesale market. But the Lebara one was definitely around that side of it. And I think, look, every MVNE is different. I think they're probably starting to emerge, and I think our MVNE stayed through the whole journey from our early days through buyout, and we continued on a similar architecture. So we were on a wholesale platform within the Vodafone, within the business, and we stayed on that platform as we transitioned to a owned retail brand. So our core IT stack stayed more or less the same. What it meant for us, though, was having more control over the side of it from the MNO side and the MVNE side. We were able to get more control from that element and drive the outcomes that we needed to, and that the MVNE was free to seek opportunities outside of our market, in markets completely where there's no competitive threat. And they're able to then look at investments and try to drive an income stream in that way. In completely separate markets. And what that allowed us to do, particularly from 2017 to 2019, was a huge digitization agenda, effectively, of then having new APIs and putting together a new web journey, and also putting together the proper iOS and Android apps in place, which allowed us to put the preferred payment gateway provider in place and ostensibly reduce the payment friction and increase the whole customer experience by a very significant magnitude. I'm talking multiples. I call it, in my mind, it's like 1,000. You can see the difference. Had immediate impacts on the churn elements, and then integrate that with the retention platforms that we put in place. But what was interesting is when we chose our retention platforms and strategies, was the particular solution we selected was in direct competition with the MVNE themselves. But we were quite clear that we have an outcome in mind, and I think, whilst I like Red One's approach very much so, we had to return a financial return. And whilst in the pricing scheme of things, we're always going to be cheaper than the MNO, and we have to drive value at the end of the day. So we're looking for every advantage. So in terms of pulling together our retention platform, which we're able to then communicate with customers via SMS, push messages on the app and email, work through that in, with some very good cloud-based solutions. This allowed our MVNE to learn those, learn the strategy that we were putting in place, and actually allowed them to work on those solutions in non-competing markets. So it was a very neat solution for our particularly unique situation. But I think from our side, I think our group did basically look at HLR and becoming a heavier MVNO probably about 6 or 7 years ago. And I think what was interesting from that was there seemed to be a trade-off on the commercial model as well. So I think going as a heavy MVNO seemed to create a sentiment in the MNO that you could lift and shift and change carriers at a whim, and that would give, basically take away the control that the MNO really has over the MVNO when they come as on a thin or a light basis. So that was an interesting discussion, and obviously the case for moving in that direction did not proceed on because of those concerns. And I think at the end of the day, I put it down to the founders and some of the original management of the Lebara business was that it really has to be a strong relationship with the MNO to carry you through. You will go through many hard times, and you need to have those core relationships in place to drive it through. And if you show dependency and vulnerability of technology to the MNO, you have a better case, as they have shown me on many occasions, to ride that through and to drive a successful outcome. But not having seen the other alternative, I'm only speculating as to what it would look like to become a full heavy MVNO.
The question both to you, for me and ask must be that if you have that approach, you must still have, an investment, a capex, because you're going in and setting up your own system. So even though you don't necessarily have a margin squeeze at the beginning, you will still have a capex in front of you, and perhaps if you still negotiate or makes a deal with a vendor, some of them will also maybe suggest a pay-as-you-grow model where you still have to give it away, maybe per active SIM per month or something like that.
Yeah, look, I think it's a good point. So in terms of our capex, we're able to reduce our capex because we remained on the wholesale platform. There were Vodafone wholesale MVNOs as well, so we were able to create effectively the structures. So those a lot of those pieces of innovations could actually be resold or provided to the other tenants on the wholesale platform, and that was a way in which we could get to market and run through with our side of it. And actually internally, and we had to be regulatory. There's regulatory issues in regards to wholesale retail within our countries. I'm sure there are in many other countries, but at least from the outset, from the IT stack, that a lot of those items could be repurposed and used for other wholesale tenants, and that provided a good basis for the group on the whole to to win new business and to strengthen and grow. And also, it was also being used as we will also be able to secure a capex investment on a basis of test and learn. We could go to market with new initiatives, new structures. For example, we brought in a data bank. So if you had unused data in your plan, you could carry that forward up to a threshold and continue to use it. A very good retention tool, much like a frequent flyer scheme used to work before COVID, but make it very hard for customers to churn away from you. And so that was something that was tested in our business and then got rolled into the MNO business very recently as a result of that. So having those sorts of ideas and working through has enabled us very successfully to secure those kinds of investments and be able to really press forward on that user case, because it de-risks the MNO taking some of those risks that they feel that they don't, very reluctant to take.
Once again, we just mentioned it a couple of times now on the regulatory side. Have you any perspective to share with us on regional-wise here in Asia on any new attempts of opening up to MVNOs, or are we seeing the opposite in the market?
Is that a question for me?
Yes.
Yeah. I think regulators have actually has broadened and opened up their thinking caps. And initially, what the regulators used to do is to just force to give out licenses and let the MVNOs go and negotiate directly with the MNOs, and that's where the struggle and the battle starts. But today, I think in most countries, regulators has come in very strong and have borne a different cap at today's timings, because they come in and they actually help to accommodate and help the MVNOs to tie up good deals with the MNO. So today, in most countries, what's happening, countries that's emerging, that's beginning to open up, like Vietnam, Philippines, and the others, they're actually looking into how the good regulators, meaning Malaysia, Singapore, who has actually gone through that curve, gone through the challenges that, where they just give out licenses and let the MVNO struggles. Today, what they're doing is they are learning and they are replicating, and the new ones that's coming in are not starting from scratch one. They actually look into the successful regulatory models that's already in existence, and they've taken it and they adapted it, and some of them has even improvised on it. So they have actually come in together and coming in with some access reference documents, documents that enables MVNO to have a good open discussion with the MNOs, and also MNOs to give more respect for MVNOs. So the regulators have come quite strong into the right position. And today things have changed. Those days where they give out license, sit back and watch the game, today they get themselves involved. So I think the regulators are pretty much playing their role quite well in this part of the world.
And Farid, you must have seen, going into markets like Thailand, where as Danny said, we've seen, perhaps a regulator, doing the talk but not the walk. You have entered Vietnam, which is just opened up fairly recently. It was before, but didn't go as planned. We also talk about the Philippines and other markets that you might look into. You must have seen some interesting approaches from regulators.
To be honest, in Thailand, Philippines, and Singapore and Malaysia, apart from the licensing interactions, no, actually, we don't see the regulator leaning on the MNOs on the commercial arrangements. If anything, they just insist that they offer wholesale pricing on a non-discriminatory basis. But there are still various ways the MNOs get around that rule, either giving you marketing fund back in return, and they're just a way. I mean, I'm from the MNO, I know how they can game the regulations. But no, actually, and we believe in a laissez-faire open market environment. We don't want a situation in Europe where the regulators actually set the wholesale pricing, because then there would be our skill in negotiation with the MNOs would be irrelevant. Everyone would have the same level playing field, and because we are incumbents, we're going to act like incumbents, and we don't want a level playing field, to be frank.
But I would say, for example, in where I'm from, is when we look at Thailand, we've seen, again, as long as you haven't launched yet, there are no issues on the licensing and the setup. But you, for example, are not allowed to become a full MVNO. And as you say, the operators, we have the 3 private operators here who are not interested in having MVNOs launch on them. It's clear after so many years of no launches on them. And then 2 state enterprises who are trying to do a turnaround, surviving on wholesale. Is there any of you mentioned that there hasn't been on the commercial part, but there has been no indication in, for example, Vietnam on from the operator side, certain limits that you need to adhere to that might not be regulatory, but more from the MNO side.
And it varies. I mean, we had lots of conversations with operators in Vietnam. We did. But Vietnam, like most Asian countries, unless you have a strong local partner, it's very hard to make inroads into the MNOs. And I think Vietnam is at stage 1 of opening up their market. You see this in nearly every country. They go through an initial phase where there's a euphoria, 100 people apply for licenses, and then within 5 years, they're all dead, except for 1 or 2. And then you get to stage 2, where the MNOs are a bit more mature about MVNOs and actually do want to make them viable. Then you see more decent wholesale rates and revenue sharing, etc. I believe Vietnam is still in phase 1. So the guys who are launching today, I don't think they will have enough skin in the game to last for very long. And then we'll see a phase 2 where it might be more successful. So we'll wait for phase 2 in Vietnam, I think.
Do you have anything you would add to this on the regulatory side?
No, I think I agree what Farid is saying, that there's phase 1 and phase 2 and phase 3. I mean, that's how it has been and it's still happening today. But I think this is where things would need to change. So the regulator shouldn't rush in by just by market forces forcing them to give out licenses and start MVNO in a specific country and go through this phase 1, and then MVNOs gets excited, come in, apply for the license, then you have 100 licensees, and at the end of the day they are little babies coming into the business. They need support and they don't get the support. So I think this has to change, and this has been a problem for a very long time. Probably, I think even my suggestion, my advice is that if any countries who are planning to open up or being forced to open up, they should actually have many discussions with the operators, MNOs, and even before giving out a license, they should actually validate the business proposition that the MVNOs want to bring into the market segment, because most MVNOs, they come in with a business model and get just to get the license, but when they negotiate with the operator, they start going into the market space of the operator. That irritates the operator. So I think in Singapore, in the early stages when I was consulting for a company, when we went to the regulator for a license, what the regulator said, I can give you a license tomorrow, but before I give you a license, why don't you go sit and negotiate with an operator, get a understanding, a commercial deal between you guys, and both of you guys come and see me, and then I'll give you you sit here and I'll sign off the license and give it to you. I think that would be the right approach rather than the other way around. So I think things are changing, things are improving, and I'm a person who always try to look into the positive side of on a very negative situation. But me, I'm a strong advocate of MVNOs. Yes, there are challenges, and many of the panelists who have shared the what's happening today and what has happened for a very long time. But I think things have to change. I think my advice is that if any countries would like to open up, they should sit down between the existing operators, come up with a strategy, come up with a model, come up with an entry point where they do how they onboard MVNOs into the system, and how do they validate and how they issue licenses. I think that will help all parties, the MNOs, the MVNOs, and also the regulators to look good in any specific country.
Let me throw in a curveball then on that comment. Would MVNO license, are they necessary?
Yeah, maybe not. All depends, because there are certain countries in Indonesia, people are operating as a MVNO-like model, but on an understanding that we are only a reseller to the operator. So as long at the end of the day, I still can operate and promote my services like at any other MVNO. I mean, to me, it is okay for me to be a reseller, as long at the end of the day, my commercial arrangement and my business understanding and my technical tie-ups are all similar to the one that MVNO set up. So in countries that, the market is very exciting, the market is very motivating, but the regulators are being challenged by the MNOs not to go into this space and give out licenses, people are still operating as resellers. You can see it's happening in Indonesia and many other countries.
Let me throw out the same Herman Ash. MVNO licenses, are they necessary? We've seen in Europe, many many of the markets, it's not necessary. It's based fully on a commercial agreement between two business parties who are launching a partnership. So is it necessary?
I think it depends on, sorry.
No, can you continue, Herman?
Yeah, I think it depends on what kind of resources that you are getting from the regulator. If you want to have numbering resources, of course, you need to get a license, but otherwise, I don't think a license is necessary because at the end of the day, the MVNO is just about the partnership.
And Ash?
I agree with all the comments. I think an open market is the way for it to happen. I think the only risk of it is obviously the level of development and the stage that the market is at. I think the comments made before, well defined. And I think obviously if you open up and start this process, then you don't want a few players to create a bad blood and harm the segment as a whole from that point. So I think on the whole, I think the barriers of entry, particularly in the mature market, are very high on their own. And working with an MNO are very much good proxies for what I'd say is getting a license. So no, I don't believe it.
Farid, do you have anything to add to this?
Yeah, I agree with Ash.
Okay, Urban and Farid?
Well, we have in Malaysia, there are pretty strict regulations around the KYC and the registration process of customers, whether it's prepaid or postpaid. And these KYC requirements and PDPA requirements are pretty strict across the region, really. So I think as long as that remains in place, governments will still want to have licensed providers getting the personal details of customers and all the anti-terrorism laws. They want to know who's using what SIM card. I don't see licensing disappearing from this part of the world in my lifetime.
Okay. Interesting. COVID-19, how has it affected your business, Farid? Let's stay with you on this one.
Well, of course, we had a complete lockdown in March and April where none of our dealers could go out and sell. And we're still quite traditional. We're not digital. We were intentionally so, because we believe that person-to-person selling is more effective than a Facebook ad. And so our sales really dropped in those months. But we are grateful because we are postpaid. We did not have the issue where a lot of telcos had where their revenue dropped 30-40% because people couldn't go out and buy reloads. In our case, we just extended the billing cycle so people had a chance to pay their bills. And we extended the channels by which you could pay your bills. And we saw our revenue drop maybe about 5%. And collection, after the lockdown, collection actually increased as people started paying what they owed us previously. So we'll probably be flat year on year in terms of revenue and profit, which I know is fantastic compared to some other industries like tourism and retail. And we're very grateful that we're in this business actually during pandemics.
Ash, have you seen any effect from the COVID-19 on the business?
Yeah, it's been quite significant. Australia is a country that's built on particularly migration and population growth. I think as with skilled population, we have, relative to the size of our country, the per capita largest intake in the world, and our economy is essentially built on those. As we become a high cost economy, we don't produce finished goods, etc., and so on. That's done in other parts of the world where it's much more feasible to do so. So that's had quite an impact on our side, and I think one of the biggest factors in the Australian economy is students, and that has had a huge impact. So I think the borders had a hard close earlier this year, very controversially so at the time, but it appeared that perhaps governments, I'm not sure what the actual rationale were, ahead of the curve, or maybe they just fluked it, who knows, but they effectively took a position on that front, and then we moved from border closures to Australians not being able to even travel outside of the country, to states locking themselves down to a lockdown at a similar time in March and April, and then trying to work through it. And life has been very, very different from that point. So I think, particularly being in the prepaid segment and so on, we did see definitely we believe the pool of connections dropped quite considerably. I think all carriers during the shock of the changes and adjustments through that period offered a lot of generosity to customers, thinking that we could be hitting an economic catastrophe here. And I think it took many weeks and months to sort of work through that, while our government in particular put a lot of support back on the table, and job retention programs called like JobKeeper and so on. And as they emerged, we gradually, in line with the industry, pulled back on some of those initiatives and so on. And I think much like the Malaysian Red One example, we saw the accounts come back into line. So from that point on, it was as a player that was more established in the market, we equally felt very privileged. We got through it okay. Just a few percentage points reduction in revenue on the whole, looking a lot worse, must admit, at the beginning of the pandemic from our side, but not as bad as recently. But definitely the pool of connections in the market is simply a lot lower. So therefore, if your business plan is one of growth and trying to get an inorganic shift in market share, this is certainly not the time to be thinking about it, as customers are sticking with incumbents and working through. And then we work from home. We're noticing that there's very erratic differences in data usages and profiles, that some people are using their fixed services, some people have got provisions provided by their employers, etc. So there's very different arrangements, and the usage profiles of the way that people consume, particularly data, is very, very different. And in the past, I'd say in the last 4 to 5 weeks, we've seen the economy reopen and some of the states reopen as well. And we're sort of establishing to a new normal until I think a vaccine will come out. And we're starting to see, at least in my city in Sydney, it's almost a return to normal in that way. But people are starting to go back into the office and go about their lives in that way. But without those restrictions in place, we see that we probably have to wait for COVID-19 to fully subside before we'll see the growth of what we saw pre-COVID, and that may well be 2 to 3 years away at the earliest.
And Herman, the same question to you, but perhaps also on with the tail on it. Are there any opportunities? The impact from the COVID, but have you seen any short-term opportunities in working from home and different lifestyle?
Yeah, we see the impact, especially in March and April. During that time, we see the impact. But then we are lucky that the momentum actually ramped up a bit. And then approaching the year end, I think the numbers is still okay. And then because in Hong Kong, because our headquarters are actually in Hong Kong, and then Hong Kong actually recovered pretty fast. That you can see that I'm now working in the office. So we take that as an opportunity that we pay extra effort to do whatever we like during that period of time, while our competitors may be forced to work from home. So we take that opportunity to compete in the market. So I think that's the situation.
And we have a question in the chat from Yogesh Kantaria, who asked, what are the thoughts on the panelists about private 5G versus MVNO? Perhaps Danny, you can pick us up on that one.
On private
5G, private 5G versus
yeah.
MVNO.
Okay, so I think I think what's happening now is that a lot of MVNO centric business from the traditional model is moving into very digitalized and technology driven models. In fact, there was a recent global MVNO study which was done. 2/3 of people who wanted to get into the MVNO space said that they will invest moving into a more digitalized and technology driven MVNO model. And even half of those 2/3 says that the best area of our MVNO space to move in is the IoT related business. And of course, with 5G coming into play, I think that it opens bigger opportunities like MVNOs who are moving away from the traditional price focus and data competitive models into more creative, more innovative, digitalized technology-based models. So you'll see a lot of MVNO players who are IoT players, eSIM, fintech, blockchain players coming into play. And this is where they would come in, as I said earlier, not as a full MVNO, because it's not an MVNO, it's not the primary game. They would still want to enter into the space with the help of an MVNO, stroke MVNE, stroke MVNA, to come in and of course, when you come into a smart partnership, you lose your revenue. Yes, you make smaller revenue, but for players, IoT players, eSIM, fintech players, they come in and not understanding the MVNO environment, and people who are in the MVNO business, who was experienced on this market segment, I think there will be a lot of merger, a lot of conversions between MVNOs and IoT players, eSIM providers, fintech players, and of course, taking advantage of the 5G opportunities. Then we'll have a lot of M2M, smart cities, utility companies, connected cars, a lot of devices and network-driven opportunities where players, which there'll be a new market segment, new players, totally new different MVNO players would be entering into this market space, and I see that to be very exciting.
Actually, turning to you, because in looking at the Australian market, we've seen recently Optus opening for MVNOs for their 5G partners. But how do you see and your thoughts on the question from Yogis about private 5G enterprise versus MVNO?
Yeah, I think 5G is an interesting evolution, because I think obviously technology-wise it has a propensity to completely replace the fixed service, especially for the consumer. And so for that reason, I think you'll see competition. So when you looked at 3G to 4G, we definitely saw evidence of working through it in our market. I'd say we're a very competitive market from that side. So I think providing that advantage and looking to get the security of the success of the MVNOs is obviously key importance on that front. And I think it's all going to come down to timing. So I think there's always one step of it making it available to an MVNO, and it's another thing about whether they'll take it up, because there may well be a price associated with it for taking it up at a certain time at launch. So obviously some smaller ones may take it up in many ways, but I think for the established players, I would expect there to be no doubt a lag, as we've seen in previous evolutions in the past from that point of view. But I think it's a very key one, very, very important. And obviously it's always dependent on the actual rollout of the technology itself. Candidly, on 5G, I think the barrier is handsets. So I think the cost of the handset probably just needs to come down a bit in the Australian market. I think it sort of equates to probably around about the $600-700 for somewhere where you can enter it. I'm sure there'll be tactical plays that come down, but I think that will be the larger barrier. Notwithstanding, in our market, there is a good share of flagship sort of handsets out there, and I think particularly looking at the price of device, looking at the fixed wireless sort of devices as well, they're quite cost prohibitive at this very early stage, but like we've seen in the past, I'm sure they'll come down very, very quickly. So I think, again, there's an MVNO opportunity there for trying to sort of solve that equation of trying to get something where you can undercut on the device side of thing, which can actually possibly drive an unequal level of market share versus an MNO.
Your thoughts on it? Your thoughts on it?
Of course, China Mobile is one of the pioneers in 5G, and we embrace the 5G technology. We are promoting 5G a lot, and you see the numbers. It tells the story. And when we go overseas via MVNO approach, we see that there are some challenges in implementing 5G for MVNO, especially if you want to provide a voice and data services. If it's data-only services, I believe that it's easier. But as long as you touch on the voice, a lot of MNOs, they are not really ready to provide a voice over LTE or voice over Wi-Fi to MVNOs. So it creates a lot of challenges to the implementation. This is number one. And then I agree with Ash that device is another key issue that we have to tackle. In China, of course, we are the market leader. Of course, we could have a good procurement negotiation power with the handset manufacturers. But in overseas, then especially for MVNOs, when your scale is not comparable with MNO, how can you source these 5G devices and then get a good deal from it? Then it becomes pretty challenging. I think that's the two barriers or challenges that MVNOs need to overcome when they consider 5G.
Farid, would you have anything to add? Do you have 5G on your program?
Yes, we should be shutting down 3G entirely next year to make way for 5G. I don't really know that much about private 5G networks, but just trying to think about it, I don't know how that would work, because you would need the spectrum. And no carrier is going to give you 1 megahertz of 5G for you to set up your own private 5G network. So while I do believe that we will have specialist IoT 5G MVNOs in the future, they will still have to ride on the telco's 5G infrastructure. And you wouldn't want the capex anyway, to roll out your own private 5G network. Maybe if you're Microsoft or Google, you might, but not in Malaysia.
It might also be that because the region has, these huge factories, and especially in the automotive industry, it would make sense, as we've seen in Germany with private enterprise 5G setups. But still, that would then be limited to an area, and that might give an opportunity for factory workers. Some of them, have 20,000 people employed, 10,000 or something. That might actually be a little bridge between a private enterprise on premise. And once your employees are outside, then you have the MVNO license set up to actually cater to your employees, bring your own devices, could be postpaid as well, of course. I think timing-wise, we are coming to an end. I would like to thank the panel very much for sharing your thoughts and your knowledge and your experience over these years, and hope to see you again soon. I would also very much like to thank Telecom World Asia for tremendous work they have done. We were supposed to go person to person with this meeting. It was postponed, and yet they still managed somehow to put all this together into these small boxes that we are in, but a gigantic program. So thank you very much, and hope to see you again next year in person, because being in person and also the cookies and the coffee that they serve at Telecom Asia, you cannot do that on Zoom. So thank you very much.
Thanks, guys. Thanks. That was a great session. And thanks for the kind words, Alan. Once again, thanks, Alan. And of course, a big thanks to Herman, Farid, Danny, and Ash for sharing your insights today. For the audience, if you have missed any sessions over the last 2 days and earlier today as well, then please note that all the presentations and panels will be available on demand for the next 3 weeks. Once again, thank you, guys, for joining us today, and have a great evening. Cheers, guys.
Cheers.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
Thank you. Bye.